Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. Lots of hugs to everybody. I hope you're doing great. I'm doing very well, thank you very much. And I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 2 of our story tonight. And what an interesting story this is. We have a woman called Claudia Hansen, and she's got $40,000 stashed at home in her apartment. And unfortunately, her daughter has let slip to her boyfriend that her mother has that kind of money around. So we're about to find out where this is going to go, because Claudia's about to take a train trip on her trip home that she takes every single night. And unfortunately, somebody's going to be sitting opposite her who doesn't have her best interests at heart. So let's continue with part 2 of our story. I had concluded that sometimes you really do have to take the bull by the horns, don't you? And just go for it. Otherwise, life can quickly pass you by, and I didn't want that to happen to me. I was desirous to become a children's author, and aspired to become a little like J.K. Rowling. But my daughter Courtney kept rudely reminding me that J.K. Rowling's story From Rags to Riches and her glittering success with her Harry Potter novels was not something that was likely to happen to me. Don't be silly, Mum. You can never be like J.K. Rowling. That woman is a legend, and you are... For a moment, my condescending daughter was caught up in her words. Whatever she had intended to say to me next, she obviously thought better about it. So maybe she did have some discretion after all, trying to spare my feelings a wee bit. But whatever she intended to say, I knew her bruising words would very lightly sting. My daughter Courtney can look like a benign teenager, but that girl has a stinger on her that would easily rival a Portuguese man of war. And I don't say that lightly by any manner of means. Like so many teenagers her age, she can be quite obnoxious, cantankerous, and downright disagreeable at the very best of times. But despite everything, I still love her. I pulled a face, pretending to be offended by her words, and said, "Why can't I be like J.K. Rowling? Are you saying all children's authors can never compete with her? Is that what you're saying?" "Pretty much, Mum. I'm sorry, but it's true. J.K. Rowling's stories have gripped the world, haven't they? But I doubt you could make up stories like she can. You have to be one hell of a good writer. And you have to be in the right place at the right time to be recognised by a distinctive publishing house. More often people get rejected all the time. And J.K. Rowling was rejected in the beginning numerous times, I believe. That's all I'm saying, Mum. If it was so easy, don't you think other aspiring children's authors would be champing at the bit to get the same kind of notoriety, like she did? And let's not kid, luck shone down on her like a bright star from heaven. And that helps an awful lot. And then there was all the publicity concerning her books, which meant all over the world people were buying the books. And then her books were turned into movies. So is it any wonder she struck gold? Mind you, having said that, since her Harry Potter novels she's pretty much faded into obscurity. But then again, she made her millions, so she probably never needs to write ever again. But I had heard she attempted to write some adult books, but wasn't desperately successful in doing so. My daughter's cutting words hit me hard. That's the problem with having a feisty teenager like Courtney. She never tells me what I want to hear, but then I don't expect that anyway. She's brazen with the truth, and when it comes to my Courtney, she could knock me for 6 at times with some of the cruel words she blasts out so easily. Ostensibly, despite her very best efforts to subdue my interest and passion in writing, I have not been remotely discouraged by her, I'm glad to say. I knew I was unlikely to become J.K. Rowling, or like her in any way, but there was no reason I couldn't become an esteemed children's author of sorts, if I put my mind to it. But with my job at Le Brun, eating away at my valuable time, I haven't been able to focus on my writing. To all intents and purposes, by the time I return home, I have to unwind first, then prepare dinner, watch television with Courtney, do a few jobs around the apartment. By the time I hit my pillow, I'm out like a light. It might only take me an hour to commute to and from work both ways. But believe it or not, 2 hours does take a huge chunk out of my day. It is only while I'm sitting on the train when I can actually focus on my writing. So I began to enjoy the train rides to and from work. Sometimes when the train draws into the station, when we're supposed to disembark, I'm almost disappointed, as I'm drawn away from my make-believe world to the less than amenable hub of reality, I'm afraid. I guess you can say writing is escapism of sorts for me, where I get to become the characters I write about, which is rather like playing a part in a movie. It certainly makes my 9-to-5 life a lot less dull and infinitely more bearable. I was extremely tired of the rat race of New York City, and I'd been waiting for a perfect opportunity to resign from my job and begin anew. I knew this afternoon when I returned home, after the train ride, I would be telling my daughter Courtney to pack up her bags because we were leaving in the morning for a cottage called the Fox and Cat, that I'd never seen before in the Colorado countryside. She'd likely think I'd lost leave of my senses, but I didn't care about that. I was not sure how she was going to take my rather sobering news when I told her I'd resigned from my job at LeBrun. Even my boss, Mr. Thornby, was mortified when I told him I was leaving. And as I hadn't taken any holiday leave, so I could leave my job that very day at a moment's notice. We will miss you very much, Claudia. It goes without saying that you have been an asset to this company. I, for one, will be very sorry to lose you. He paused for a brief moment, rubbing his chin reflectively, that looked like it was spattered with silver dust from the beard he'd been attempting to grow for the last year or so, with very little success. Why some men who can't grow beards try to do this, I honestly don't know. Is this what I think it is, Claudia? He asked me, raising a silver brow above his steely grey eyes. I will say this about Mr. Thornby. He had very attractive eyes. Yes, Mr. Thornby, I just want to give my writing career a chance. I've saved up enough money to give me a bit of a head start. Good on you, Claudia. I'm proud of you. That's what I've always admired about you. You're not afraid to plunge into the deep end, even if you have to swim with the sharks. Just so you know, if things should go pear-shaped for you, which I sincerely hope on your behalf that they won't, there will always be a job waiting for you here at LeBrun. If, however, you do become a world-famous writer like J.K. Rowling one day, I would very much like your autograph. That is so kind of you to say, Mr. Thornby. I don't know what to say. And as for being a success story like J.K. Rowling, I don't think so. But I want to give my writing my all. But you're so kind, Mr. Thornby, offering me my job back in the future. I do appreciate the security that offers me. It's nothing to do with kindness, Claudia. They don't make people like you anymore. You're one of the most dedicated people on my team, and it's going to be impossible to replace you. Thank you, Mr. Thornby. I do appreciate that. As I stood there rather stoically on the platform at Grand Central, I pulled out my cell phone from my red leather handbag and gave my daughter Courtney a phone call. I wanted to clear the air with my daughter. She had thrown such a formidable tantrum when I'd insisted she cleaned up all the chocolate cake mix she'd managed to get over everything. She hadn't been best pleased to scrub up after herself, and had slammed the door to her bedroom behind herself after she'd completed the job for me. She refused to have anything to do with me for the rest of the entire evening. It's amazing how a teenager can make her mess seem like all your fault. What? Came my belligerent daughter's voice at the end of the line. What is it, Mum? Are you checking up on me? To see that I haven't put cake mix all over your perfect kitchen countertops? Is that it? Don't be like that, Courtney. It's not necessary. It really isn't. Don't be like what, Mum? Indignant with me. I think it was very reasonable of me asking you to clear up after yourself in the circumstances, don't you think? When I cook, I always clean up after myself, and you should do the same. Well, bully for you, Mum. We can't all be as perfect as you, can we? Look, Courtney, is it really necessary to be so angry? I mean, honestly, you're holding on to such anger, and it's not doing you any good. Can't we move on from this, love? I phoned you to make peace with you, if you must know. I was thinking I might pick up a takeaway for you for dinner tonight, when I return to the apartment. Something from Chick-fil-A, perhaps, or Taco Bell, or even Wendy's, if you like. And there is that good Chinese place you rather like. Would you like me to go there for you, perhaps? What would you like, sweetheart? I'd like to spoil you this evening. You want to spoil me, do you, Mum? That's rich coming from you. You think buying a takeaway is going to make everything better, do you? Forget it, Mum. Get what you like. At that, my daughter slammed down the phone on me. I can't say I was surprised. I kind of anticipated that kind of reaction from her. I sighed in exasperation as I slipped my cell phone back into my leather handbag. Why was it that I was made to feel like I had wronged my daughter and needed to apologize for something that was entirely her fault? Teenagers always twisted things for you, so that you were made to feel like the bad guy. Was it so unreasonable for me to expect her to clean up after herself? As I was contemplating all this, at that specific moment, I'm glad to say, the train roared into the platform at Grand Central, and the doors swooshed open. I clicked into gear at once, hurriedly making my way to my usual seat, with its fixed table, where I intended to get caught up in my writing once again. Now I was comfortably seated, so I removed my laptop from my large red leather handbag and put it on the table and began to tap away at the computer. I was so completely absorbed in my writing that I didn't notice the stranger slipping into the seat opposite me. The train soon chugged away very happily as it left Grand Central, and that was when I heard the stranger's voice, interrupting my train of thought. "Do I know you from somewhere?" he asked me. "You look awfully familiar." I realized the man was talking to me. I will admit I felt a tad annoyed that the stranger opposite me was engaging in conversation. Could he not see I was focused on my work? What was wrong with him? Was he trying to pick me up or something? If that was indeed the case, I was not biting into his bait. I wasn't remotely interested in having a relationship with anyone. I was still scared off from my last boyfriend that had robbed me blind. I looked up at him cautiously, giving him a watery smile. "You've probably mistaken me for someone else, I'm afraid. Let's just say a lot of women my age look rather like me, I expect." The stranger bobbed his head to one side, shaking his head vigorously. "You don't give yourself credit. Your looks are very distinctive. You easily stand out from any crowd." He paused for a brief moment and then nodded his head furiously. "Yes, that's it. I know. I'm pretty sure I've seen you at the Blue Witch coffee shop before. Yes, that's where I've seen you." "Well, I do go to that coffee shop rather regularly," I admitted, feeling absolutely certain that this man was obviously trying to pick me up. The stranger gave me a warm, very genuine smile. I was struck by how extremely good-looking he was, but I wasn't going to allow that to distract me from my writing. I had bigger fish to fry. In the morning, me and my daughter Courtney would be moving to Colorado. I just needed to get back to the apartment, and after I picked up a takeaway from somewhere, we'd get our bags all packed. Luckily, the apartment that I rented from a very amenable landlord was fully furnished. Me and Courtney didn't own a ton of stuff, I'm glad to say. We had never been hoarders, so my large SUV would be big enough to contain all our worldly possessions for just one trip to Colorado. "What are you writing?" the stranger asked me. "I hope you don't mind me inquiring, but I'm rather curious. You seem incredibly focused on the job at hand." "Oh, you know," I said nonchalantly. "Stuff from work." "I don't believe that for a single second," said the stranger. "You're pulling the fast one on me. If you were doing stuff from work, you'd never be that driven or focused. My guess is you're writing a book. You're an aspiring author, and hoping that one day your work shall be published. Am I right, or am I right?" he said with a cocky air of smugness on his face. His off-the-cuff random remarks left me completely bewildered, as you can imagine, in the way you would be if you went to the grocery store, and the supermarket teller you didn't know from a bar of soap Started telling you things about yourself they couldn't possibly know. I looked up at the stranger, confounded. How could he know all this from observing me writing away on my computer laptop, that I was writing a novel? How can you know this? I asked, looking up at the man from my laptop rather curiously. The man chuckled. He looked amused and seemed happy to have my undivided attention. It's called being observant. So I take it I'm right. You are writing a book then. Well, I'm trying to write a book, I admitted. When I can find the time in my busy schedule, that is. Do you mind me asking, ma'am, how many words have you written so far? He asked me. About 60,000, I said. The man whistled. That's impressive. If you're so astute, I challenged him, what do you think I'm writing about? I almost regretted having said this, because I didn't want to open a dialogue with this man. Now I was giving him carte blanche to talk to me the entire journey, and I really wanted to focus on my work. Let's see, shall I? Said the man. I watched as he put a hand on his head. I noticed his blonde hair was shaved on the sides, and in the middle had been made to look quite spiky. He acted like he was thinking about my question long and hard. His dramatic gesture made me smile. He was never going to guess. I was desirous to become an aspiring children's author. If he got that right, I'd probably eat my seat, let alone my hat if I actually had one with me. Well, I think you're too driven to be a romantic type, so you're not writing a romantic novel, he said. If you were, your clothes would be a lot more bohemian. Your hair would be loose and carefree, and not tied back in a neat ponytail like it is right now. Could you be writing a crime novel or a thriller? The man once again massaged his long lean fingers through the spikes on the top of his head, as if once again he was lost in thought. No, you're not writing a crime thriller. Definitely not a crime thriller. I'm not? I inquired. Why do you say that so confidently? No, you're not. Nor are you writing a horror like a Stephen King book. You don't look the type. Well, I didn't know there was a type, I said. What am I supposed to look like if I write a horror? Am I supposed to be covered in tattoos and look as if I'm a goth? Is that what you think? You look very sensible. Too sensible to be a horror writer. Look at the way you're dressed, for example. Very businesslike and practical in that navy blue suit of yours. A horror writer wouldn't dress like that. They would probably have tattoos and ear piercings, that's for sure, and maybe wear a lot of black in their wardrobe. What was this man talking about, I wondered. Maybe there was method to his madness. What he said next took me aback. Then, of course, there's the world of children's fiction, isn't there? The man studied me as if he was reading me like an open book. I held my breath very cautiously, and then he said, Yes, that's it. You're an aspiring children's author. You fancy yourself as the next wannabe J.K. Rowling. You're trying to follow in her footsteps. Am I right or am I right? He said, looking as triumphant as if he'd got the dart in the bullseye. I stared at him incredulously. Was this man psychic or something? I was so incredibly amazed by his revelation that I'd forgotten all about my work that was spread out before me. You're right, I admitted. I want to be a children's writer. But being like J.K. Rowling, well, that's a big stretch. But I guess I can dream, can't I? Honestly, I don't know how you could know all this. I'm incredibly impressed. Well, said the man, I told you if you watch people enough, you glean things about them, don't you? I'm not sure you do, you know, I said. I think you may have some psychic abilities to be able to guess so accurately. Can you guess my name, perhaps? I challenged him. Now, I bet you'll never get that right, and I certainly don't expect you to. The man grinned. You want to catch me out, is that it? Pretty much, I said cheekily. Let's just say I'm reasonably confident you'll never guess my first name. Well, you've got to give me a clue, haven't you? Is it a common name or is it unusual? No, it's not common, but I wouldn't say it's an unusual name either. Having said that, I did not know anyone when I was at school who had my name. All right, I'll try to guess, said the stranger. You're definitely not Brittany or Rachel. You're not a Monica or a Bronwyn. I grinned at him. No, I'm none of those names, I will admit. I think your name begins with a C. Yes, that's it. It definitely begins with a C. No, you're not Cindy. You can't be Cindy. You're not a Cindy. Let's see. You're not a Caroline or a Kathy. I think you might be a Claudia, said the man. You know what? He said, wagging a finger at me. You're definitely a Claudia. That's it. I was speechless. My blood ran cold. How could the stranger possibly know my name? Was it really random luck that he had guessed it like that? And that I was writing a children's book? How could he possibly know these things, especially my name? Have you been spying on me by any chance? How can you possibly get my name so accurate? Yes, my name is Claudia, as it happens. The man tapped his nose. You could say I just know things. I bet I can guess your daughter's name as well. Let's see. I think her name also begins with a C like yours does. Now, she's not a Kathy. She's not a Cindy. No, she would be a Courtney. And my bet is she's probably 16 years old. Am I right or am I right? He said again very smugly, so much so that I wanted to lean forwards and slap him across the face. I felt so incredibly annoyed. Who are you? I asked the man, my whole body now trembling with trepidation. I didn't like where this conversation was going. There was something insidious about this man, as if the cracks beneath his attractive veneer were finally beginning to reveal themselves to me. There was a very inauspicious side to his personality. I could see that clearly. I was tempted to pick up my laptop and venture down the carriageway of the train to find somewhere else to sit. This stranger was giving me an unfortunate attack of the heebie-jeebies, and even my stomach was beginning to spasm and recoil in discomfort. My name is Ozzy, he told me, and then he paused and looked at his cell phone. He leaned over to show me his cell phone. I want you to look at my cell phone closely, at the photograph on it. Look at the woman in the picture, will you? I've got a good feeling you will recognize her rather well. I snatched the man's cell phone from him, staring in at the picture. Two people were lying on a bed together, cradled in each other's arms. And that was when I realized one of the people was my daughter, Courtney. When I realized I was staring at a picture of my daughter in a young teenager's arms, I felt as if the ground beneath me was going to slip away, and my heart became completely hollow. It began to boom loudly in my chest, so much so that I could barely hear the sound of my own voice. Where on earth did you get this footage from? I demanded the man tell me, after almost dropping his cell phone onto the floor of the train, where it landed with a mighty crash, but thankfully didn't break. Careful, said the man, reaching down to the floor to retrieve his phone. These things are expensive to replace, you know. I stared at the man, my mouth hanging open so wide, my eyes becoming the size of saucers. What on earth was going on here? I didn't understand any of this. Why was my daughter Courtney lying in a teenager's arms? And more to the point, how was it remotely possible a stranger I met on the train, calling himself Ozzy, happened to be in possession of footage of my daughter Courtney? Something very strange was going on here, and I didn't like it at all. I felt as if I'd been dragged, kicking and screaming, into a nightmare I wanted no part of. The man, calling himself Ozzy, leaned forward and spoke in a muted but warning voice. The laughter in his eyes had all but faded away. They had become cold and very hard, as if any former light I'd ever seen in them had finally been expunged. Now I want you to listen to me, Claudia. Hard and good. Do you understand? Your daughter is in your apartment with my brother Keegan. You can see him there in the picture. She's been restrained and tied up by my brother. He's a very bad man, a dangerous man, and he will happily kill your daughter if you don't do exactly as I say. If you think of calling the police, even for a second, at any point in time, before you arrive back at your apartment, your daughter is as good as dead. And we don't want that, do we, Claudia? So I need you to listen to me very carefully and cooperate. Is that understood? I nodded. Please, I'm begging you. Don't hurt my daughter. Please don't hurt her. She's my baby. If you do what I say, Claudia, then everything will go swimmingly for you. And when you get back to your apartment, your daughter will be intact. But if you mess with me and my brother, you'll find your daughter's body parts lying spewed all over your apartment. Because my brother is, well, let's just say, a very aggressive, violent man. He tutted. If he gets upset, there is no telling what he's capable of doing. When he gets angry, let's just say a cantankerous rhino has absolutely nothing on him. Do you get what I'm saying, Claudia? I cupped my hands over my mouth and cried out in terror. No, no, please don't you let him touch him. Don't you let him hurt her. I'm begging you. What do you want from me? I asked. I'll get you anything you want if you promise me not to hurt my girl. She's only 16. Shush, don't you dare speak loudly to draw attention to yourself. Because if you start playing any games, lady, you're going to be very sorry. Do you understand? Said Ozzy, stiffly examining the carriage to check that nobody was watching us. People were so caught up in their cell phones, they paid me and Ozzy no heed. If they had done so, they might have thought we were a couple engaging in a squabble. And that had happened many times on these train journeys. So I imagine any noisy outburst would not really strike anyone as particularly unusual. Ozzy hissed like a poisonous viper, glaring at me in extreme indignation. You need to be quiet, Claudia, he warned. All I want from you is the combination of your safe. I understand from my brother Keegan. Your daughter says you keep $40,000 in your safe. So I want all the money. Now you know exactly where I'm going with this, don't you? He said, cocking his eyebrow and giving me one of his steely gazes. He was clearly thoroughly enjoying holding me to ransom like this. Why are you doing this to me? I don't understand. What have I ever done to you? Why would you want to hurt me and my daughter Courtney? I never said I wanted to hurt you or your daughter Courtney. What do you take me for? I'm not a monster, Claudia. Neither is my brother. But if he's provoked, there is no telling of what he is capable of doing. This is not personal. Just like any other man, I want to make money, and $40,000 will be a good innings after a stint in prison for grievous bodily assault, and some might say attempted murder. If I hadn't been arrested, I would have probably killed the bugger, without any problems at all. And once you've almost killed one man, it's not hard to start killing another. And you're telling me this for what exactly? Why are you telling me this? Why do you think I'm telling you this, Claudia? Isn't it blindingly obvious? To let you know exactly who you're dealing with. If you mess around with me, or play any silly games, or even dare call the police, even after this nice little transaction of ours is complete. I've got some nasty friends out there, Claudia, all who've been in prison themselves, and some of these men owe me a big, big favour. And believe it or not, I will call it in, if I'm ever arrested. These are the kind of unsavoury people that can make somebody's tragic death look like a dreadful accident. So if you do dare go to the police, Claudia, after you've given me the combination for your safe and we've extracted all the money, you will find your days left on this earth will be numbered. We can't have that, can we? I spat at the man contemptuously, glaring at him furiously. You are a monster. Can't you earn a decent day's living like any normal person? Why do you have to exploit people like me and my daughter? What have we ever done to you? I worked damn hard for all that money so that I could make a life for myself. Have you got no shame? No, I don't have shame, Claudia. It's a luxury I can't afford. Like you, I'm doing a hard day's work. It's been very tiresome, believe it or not, following you around for 2 weeks, getting to know you a little better. And I have to say this, Claudia, you don't exactly have the most inspiring life, commuting to the Big Apple every single day. I almost feel sorry for you. But then again, I've never been awfully sentimental. At least I work honestly for a living. You wouldn't know the meaning of being honest if it hit you in the face. You should try it sometime. It feels good to live a life of integrity, and at least I can sleep at night. The man ignored my remarks and began to tap into his cell phone efficiently. I'm calling my brother now. He's at the apartment right now with your daughter, waiting on my call, so he can get to the money. So you're going to give me the combination to your safe, are you not, Claudia? I'm sure your daughter's life means much more to you than $40,000. That's a pitiful amount of money in the grand scheme of things. I'll give you the number as long as you don't hurt my daughter. But what I want to know is how on earth do you know about the money in my safe in the first place? Ozzy let out a big chuckle. Oh, didn't I tell you, Claudia? Dear me, I thought I did, said Ozzy, letting out a big chuckle. A little birdie who happens to be your daughter Courtney was tweeting a little too much, wasn't she? Turned out she couldn't keep that big gob of hers shut and was spilling all her secrets to my brother. Apparently she resents you for not giving her cash to go off and have a good time at the mall. Even she wants to break into that safe of yours to extract a bit of cash. She told my brother Keegan that you keep $40,000 stashed away in a safe. And when he heard that, well, he wasn't going to walk away, was he? Not when he knew that $40,000 could be gained from getting a little familiar with Courtney. And to think the poor little mite thought my brother was in love with her. Oh, you are disgusting, really disgusting, demeaning my daughter like this, and getting your brother to use her so unkindly. I almost feel sorry for your daughter, Claudia, being taken in by my brother like that. But then again, look at his photograph. I mean, can you blame your callow daughter for falling for him so hard? The girls all swoon over him, like bees around a honey pot. It's pathetic, really. My brother's got film star looks, but sadly he's not as savvy as I am. If you want to blame anyone for the pickle you find yourself entangled in, you can blame your daughter Courtney. She's the one that opened this can of worms for us. And I'm not going to close that can for a second. We might as well indulge and make the most of it. I stared at Ozzy with gog eyes, and as I looked at him, I began to wonder how I could ever fleetingly have found him even remotely attractive. Suddenly in my vision, he became the ugliest, most grotesque man I have ever had the privilege to meet. He definitely was a monster as far as I was concerned. I could easily imagine him going to prison for grievous bodily assault. That made perfect sense to me. This man could not be trusted an inch, and I doubted he'd ever done an honest day's work in his entire life. The man pitied me for going to work every day, to bring at home an honest wage, whereas he thoroughly enjoyed robbing people blind. That was very clear. Did he have absolutely no conscience? How did he get to sleep at night, I wondered. I absolutely believed him that he'd spent a stint in prison. And if his brother was anything like him, then my daughter was potentially in grievous danger. How on earth had she found herself entangled with such a dreadful young teenager, who was obviously about 2 years older than her? I had spoken to her at great length about not getting involved with any boys, but obviously she had refused to listen to me, which was so typical. Of course, I knew the answer to my question. My daughter loved the surfer boy look. She had posters on her bedroom walls of young celebrities that didn't look much different from this Keegan fellow that she was dating. I didn't know how dangerous Keegan could potentially be, but I was certainly not prepared to take any risks as far as my daughter was concerned. I knew that I had to cooperate with Ozzy, and furthermore, I would not be going to the police to report the robbery, even after the man had acquired his ill-gotten gains. A man like Ozzy was clearly a violent thug, and I wasn't going to throw our lives away over $40,000. No amount of money was worth it. All I cared about is that me and my daughter Courtney got out of this mess in one piece. I would never forgive myself if anything bad were to happen to her. So there we are. That is the end of part 2. Part 3 is tomorrow night. It's getting very, very heated. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.